There is another thing that a lot of people don't talk about in this Middle East discussion. And that is, a lot of people are saying that, Palestinians had land taken from them in 48. And that's why they call it like the Nakba, I think it's called, the catastrophe. And they want their land back, right? And so a lot of the discussion is like, well, how do you unring the bell? How do you make that happen? How do you dissolve a state? Like some of it seems a little unrealistic when it comes down to it. Like I think anything beyond a two-state solution at this point seems a little unrealistic. But let's just say we were going to have a policy in the Middle East of granting back land and property and everything that was taken from people in 48. Do you realize how much we would have to do? Because it's not just Israel. Do you realize how many Jews lived across the Middle East? Like there were Jews in Syria, in Jordan, in Iraq, in Egypt. Jews were thriving in the 40s, like 30s and 40s, all across the Middle East. There were large Jewish communities in every single Arab country across the Middle East, like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Jews in every single one of these countries. And then what happened was they created the state of Israel and the state of Palestine with the UN resolution. And then these Arab countries seized their property, seized their wealth, seized their land, and they all had to flee. And where did they flee to? The closest place that they could go to was Israel. It was almost like a coordinated thing where they were like, okay, we're gonna take all of these Jews' property, we're gonna take all of their wealth, we're gonna take everything they have, and then they had to run to the closest safe place possible, which would be this little tiny country of Israel. So now you had all of these countries with tens or over 100,000 Jews living in them that now have none. There are no Jews living in any of these countries anymore. And if they are, it's very minute, like very small. And then, so they all run to this little country, and then they go attack them. If you were an Arab country trying to get rid of all of the Jews in the entirety of the Middle East, what better way to do it than by taking away everything that they have and forcing them to go run to one centralized location and then all jumping on that centralized location and attacking it? It was almost like as if it was all coordinated as a final way to get rid of all of the Jews in the Middle East. Now, it failed, and the Jews managed to defend themselves successfully in the War of Independence, and they kept their state. But if we're going to be talking about the giving back of land, the giving back of homes, the giving back of property, the giving back of wealth, that can't be done in a vacuum. That has to be done across the board for the entirety of what happened in that time. Iraq, Jordan, Syria, Egypt, all of those other countries have to do that. And also, in 48, when Israel successfully defended itself, Jordan absorbed the West Bank and Egypt absorbed Gaza. Why didn't they have to pay any sort of penalties, or why didn't they give the Palestinians their land that they were supposed to get in 48? Shouldn't they be responsible for some of that stuff too? Like, it's just the story of the world that everything that goes wrong gets blamed on the Jews and nobody else gets any sort of thought about, oh, let's blame them too. Let's look at them for their responsibility. No, it's just another example of anti-Semitism that's going on here, is that the Jews get blamed for the creation of a ethno-state, but yet you have Islamic states all across the Middle East, and nobody bats an eye. They claim that the Jews, kicked the Palestinians out of their homes. Now, in some cases, Israel has kicked Palestinians out of their homes, like when they bulldoze homes and let settlers take over. That's BS, and that needs to stop. And I disagree with that, them doing that wholeheartedly. And if they ever do a, West Bank and Gaza become a singular Palestinian state, then I'm fully support those settlers being forced to move out. Or saying, hey, if you choose to live there, you're living in Palestine. You're not, that's not Israel, that's Palestine. Deal with it. But they talk about that, but hardly anybody talks about the fact that Jews got their property, land, wealth stolen from them across the Middle East. Because when it happens to the Jews, nobody bats an eyelash. And that's why, even though I'm not going to say that all anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic, there is a lot of anti-Zionism that is anti-Semitic, because it's very hard for people to make the argument and not have it come across as both. There are people that can do it. There are people that do it well. A lot of those people are Jews. The people that are able to make that distinction tend to be Jewish people who are not Zionists. And of course, the definition of what a Zionist is also changes depending on who you talk to. It used to be, like, my opinion of what a Zionist was somebody who believed that the entirety of the land, from Lebanon to the Red Sea, from Jordan and Syria to the Mediterranean and the Suez Canal, whatever, to the Sinai, that all of that should belong to Israel and none of it is Palestinian. To me, that was Zionism. The entire land, to me, a Zionist was the whole land belongs to Israel, none of it is Palestinian, no land for peace. To me, that was Zionism. And to me, if you supported a two-state solution, that was not Zionism. That was somebody who, if you're willing to give up land for peace, you were not a Zionist. Now, they've moved that goalpost. Now, if you support a two-state solution, you're a Zionist. Because you now support any land that's called Israel in that territory. If you support anything called Israel in that territory, you're now labeled a Zionist, and it's used in a derogatory way. And I fear that at some point, if some people were to say, okay, let's make one country that's for everybody, but the Jews should have a right to be there too in that one country, that people who say that are then also going to be called Zionists. Because to some people, it's not about whether or not Israel is there. For some people, it's about the fact that Jews are there, which is why from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free is viewed by many people as anti-Semitic and a call for genocide of Jewish people, because that's why Hamas used it. That's why Hamas used that terminology in their founding document. That's why Hamas uses it. That's why they've repeated that phrase. Again, do I believe that some people use that phrase without the intention of genocide for the Jews? Sure. But again, just because people have an intent to use it without ill intent, it doesn't mean that using it is right. Like, sometimes people take a phrase and use it for evil, and it gets permanently stained with that evil. Just like sometimes people take a symbol that wasn't previously used for evil, and then it gets permanently stained with evil, and it can never be used again, like a swastika. You're not going to be able to use a swastika again because of the Nazis. You're not going to see people making an argument that are not Nazis, they're not Jew haters, who are going to say, well, I think I should be able to use a swastika because it's not fair that the Nazis used it, whatever, blah, blah, blah. People understand that if you're using a swastika, you're being a Jew hater. You're being an anti-Semite. But for some reason, we can't make that same argument about from the river to the sea. Why? Is it because the people using it are also oppressed? Maybe. But the people also using it are Hamas. And Hamas was founded with a specific intent for genocide, for completely clearing the area, not just of Israel, but of Jews as a whole. And so if you have an organization created for the elimination of Jews, you have an organization that's funded by Iran who wants to eliminate the area of all the Jews, then you know what? Insisted, repeated use of that phrase is stubborn at best and anti-Semitic at worst. And if people are not gonna listen to Jewish people about issues about anti-Semitism, and especially if they're on the left, people on the left all day long will tell you to listen to people about issues pertaining to their own oppression and to their own marginalization. When it comes to racism, you listen to black people about what black people deal with. And if a black person is talking to you and telling you about their oppression, about their marginalization, about racism, you listen to them. You don't question them. You don't deny them. You listen. You give it to them. Does that mean that every single time they say is correct? Not 100% of the time. Probably point to one or two examples where, maybe somebody jumped the shark. Like the people that I think tried to say that the guy with the Obama rodeo clown mask was being racist when that guy always wore the mask of every president throughout, his tenure as a rodeo clown. Like that's an example of people trying to claim something was racist when it wasn't. But generally speaking, the exception proves the rule. Generally speaking, you listen to black people when black people are talking about their oppression, their marginalization. You listen to trans people when trans people are telling you about their marginalization, their oppression. You listen to them. You trust them. You listen to obese people when obese people are trying to tell you about what happens to them as life is them. Now, frequently they don't. But again, it's just another example from my life where, you don't listen, you shouldn't be listening to skinny people about what obese people deal with. You listen to obese people about what obese people deal with. Because we have the lived life experience. You trust the lived life experience of black people when they tell you what they've dealt with. You trust the lived life experience of LGBTQA folks when they tell you about it. You trust the lived life experience of women when women tell you what they deal with. Like when a woman tries to tell you that something is sexist, you don't just write it off out of hand. I mean, I've done that before in the past. I'm guilty of that in the past, and I've learned to change my behavior because I've learned that you shouldn't do that. You should trust when people tell you about their, because even if it's counterintuitive, if you don't have the lived life experience as a woman, you can't know what a woman deals with. So you need to trust them to understand what they're saying and what they deal with. And the same thing, and this is what a leftist person will tell you for every single marginalized and oppressed group. For some reason, for some unbeknownst reason, for Jews, it doesn't happen. For Jews, we don't get that same benefit of the doubt. For Jews, people make excuses as to why you shouldn't listen to us. And that's why we get terrified. And that's why we get upset. That's what we have to deal with. It's not just the fact that people are anti-Semitic. It's not just the fact that people want to come after us and kill us for who we are. It's the fact that people won't listen to us. And we'll make excuses as to why they can't listen to us. So that when they do start coming after us, it's too late. It already starts happening. Now, fortunately, like I've seen some creators, some other creators from other marginalized oppressed groups who have taken the steps to stand up and say, look, while you're opposing the oppression of what's going on to the Palestinian people, you cannot also be anti-Semitic and claim to be leftist. And I've noticed those people, and I've heard those people, and I've taken the time to say, I appreciate y'all because y'all are doing the good work. Y'all are stepping up and saying what needs to be said. And I appreciate the fact that they're doing that because they don't have to, but they are doing what needs to be done to help us get our voices amplified. Because we're a very, very small percentage of the population of the planet. We don't have that voice as much as people stereotypically want to say that we do. We don't. And people will just turn the other way. But yeah, again, for some reason, I understand why conservatives will pay us lip service. Conservatives will pretend to love us because they'll pretend to love Israel because they'll cheer Israel on as they blow up Palestinians because they love to see dead Palestinians. And they only want us there in Israel because in order for the Christian prophecy to become true, we need to be all over there so we can die first. You know, again, with friends like that, who needs enemies? But, you know, some of the most vicious anti-Semitic comments that I've witnessed and have dealt with have come from conservative Christians. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that, you know, conservative Christians, you know, Republican MAGA folks are my friends by any stretch of the imagination. When you have Donald Trump saying the people marching alongside the Nazis in Charlottesville are good people. They're not. But the leftists, I expect more from. The leftists who will tell you to listen to marginalized and oppressed people will ignore us. And again, maybe it's just because of the fact that, you know, especially with Ashkenazi Jews, I look like a white guy. You look at me, not many people look at me and say, oh, he's Jewish. You can look at other people and say, oh, they're Jewish, but not a lot of people look at me and say, oh, that's a Jewish guy. But, so I get the benefit of white privilege until my Jewishness comes up, and then I don't. But when I start rounding up Jews and start sending us off to camps, they don't give a crap about my whiteness. The Nazis don't think I'm white. I had somebody on TikTok earlier today that was, or today or yesterday, that was like, Jews are not white. And I was like, explain yourself, because normally those types of comments come from white supremacist type folks. Because that's where it starts. We're others. To the Nazis, to the white supremacists, we're others. We are not really white folks. We're just convenient for their purposes until we're not. So, I would just implore everybody, especially those people on the left, while you're fighting the good fight for Palestinian folks who do deserve to have people fighting for them, fight for the Jewish people too. Listen to Jewish people when they're telling you that things hurt them. Listen to us when we tell you that slogans like from the river to the sea are things that call for our marginalization, that call for our oppression, that call for our genocide, that call for our deaths, because Hamas has embraced it and used it and has tainted. Even if that slogan started off as a perfectly fine slogan, Hamas tainted it so badly that it should not be used anymore, similar to a swastika. And if you can understand that, then I don't know what else I can say to you. But if you're the type of person on the left who's going to tell everybody to listen to the live life experience of every other marginalized and oppressed person except for Jewish people, then you're going to be my next hypocrite of the week. And I'm not happy about it.